Hello and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Today is Saturday, July 8th. My name is Chris Crawford. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm joined by my good buddy, Drew Silva. We're going to go over the Futures Game, which is an event that I am headed to right after we are done recording here. Very excited to be able to do that. Got some fancy seats for it. I won't be doing any scouting. I will be drinking a bunch of diet soda, eating some good food, and watching some good prospects. But before we get into that, let's talk about some headlines. And look, Drew, Alek Manoah was a guy that fantasy players were drafting pretty high. Now, he was considered a fairly volatile player, I think, coming into the season. Some people real high, some people real low. I think the people that were low were feeling pretty good, unfortunately, about what has happened with Alek Manoah this year. But he's back in the majors after his return to the minors, and he looked pretty darn good, Drew.
Yeah, I mean, big props to Manoah for jumping right back into the Blue Jays Major League rotation Friday night against the Tigers and striking out 8 batters over 6 innings of 1-run ball in what was a 12-2 blowout win for Toronto. Detroit's lineup is about as bad as it gets, but the 8 strikeouts, no walks. Manoah showed great command, 91 pitches only to cover his 6 frames. It, like you said, man, it was just kind of one of the oddest falls from grace, I guess you would say, in recent baseball history. That sounds dramatic, but to go from being on some people's minds a preseason Cy Young candidate to a 6.36 ERA, 1.90 WHIP, and an early June demotion to the minors, it was all pretty strange. But he was dominant in a Double-A start last week, and then dominated kind of a Double-A Tigers team Friday in Detroit. We can hopefully just kind of give Manoah a clean slate entering and then coming out of the All-Star break. He's an obvious must-add. Again, if he was dropped last month and is still sitting out there on any waiver wires, but he's not available in competitive leagues. The stuff and the mound presence is too good with him, and he's hopefully calmed all the walks. Like, that was the main issue for why he was struggling to get through, some lopsided innings when he was up in the first half with the Blue Jays. We'll see how it lines up. Manoah should get the Padres next. That'd be the Blue Jays' second series after the break. That's an intriguing matchup with San Diego. Well, it'll tell us more than what that start against the Tigers told us, but definitely encouraged by what we saw from him on Friday night.
For sure. Yeah, it's great to see him back. By the way, he was not the only return. Real quick, I want to talk about Carlos Rodon. Made his first start of 2023. It finally happened. 2 runs in 5 innings, but not the most dominant that we'll see him pitch. But worth pointing out that the velocity looked good, averaged 95.5 miles per hour on his fastball. He threw his fastball a lot. 53 of those compared to 16 breaking balls, 12 sliders, 2 curves, 2 changeups. I think he's going to be just fine, folks. It's great to see him back. Maybe you'll see some clunkers, as this is basically the start of his season. We see that lots of good pitchers get off to mediocre starts, but I believe Carlos Rodon, his stuff competes with anybody in baseball right now. Really nice to see him back on the mound. I imagine he'll start either Friday or Saturday after the All-Star break. They can get that rotation set up, and that rotation is awfully important because, Drew, that lineup stinks. Holy crap on a cracker. The Yankees lineup right now is like 92, 93 Yankees bad, which it's been a while since we could talk about a Yankees team that is this ineffective with the offense. Aaron Judge might be the most valuable player just because you're seeing what happens when Aaron Judge isn't a part of the New York Yankees. If you went by that quota, I think he would definitely qualify for it. Those are some positive news returning. We've got some negative news for the Pirates, Drew. A couple of guys going on the injured list.
Yeah, Andrew McCutchen and Brian Hayes both hit the IL for the Pirates on Friday. McCutchen with a lingering elbow issue that first sort of popped up toward mid to late June, and now he's going to need at least 10 days off. For Hayes, it's a quick return back to the IL after he was just activated on Thursday. He's dealing with the same ongoing lower back discomfort. As far as the fantasy fallout with these two, McCutchen's been pretty good in his return to Pittsburgh. Like, definitely has some value in fantasy, but he was slumping so far in July, probably related to that elbow discomfort. He could be a trade chip for the Pirates if he gets back to full health before August 1st, which is the trade deadline. He's expressed a desire to stay, and play another year with Pittsburgh in 2024. But they'll deal him if some contending team wants to find a spot for a guy who can hit at the top of the lineup still with some power in his mid-30s. Jaiman Choi probably slides into the DH role for Pittsburgh with McCutchen out and possibly being on the trade block. Choi went nuts on his minor league rehab assignment with 10 hits in 31 at bats, 3 homers, 9 RBIs in 9 games between AA Altoona and AAA Indianapolis. Maybe in like a very deep or NL only league, Choi would have some fantasy appeal. But I don't really buy into what he did in that limited stint on the farm. With Hayes, it's a bummer. Like lots of other injuries just building up on his ledger already at age 26. He's not running as much this year, I guess for obvious reasons with the lingering back stuff. And he doesn't offer enough power to be like a regular fantasy third baseman. So I don't know. I think he's almost like droppable in a shallower, 12 team league if you were still hanging on to him, or put him on an IL stint and hope he can rebound in the second half. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a long absence, but they'll probably be a little more careful with it than they were the first time around. Jared Triolo is going to get an extended look at third base with the Pirates. He's kind of solid with some
Yeah.
speed, maybe gets leadoff opportunities against lefties. Actually, Henry Davis hit leadoff Friday, which was interesting. His first time in the leadoff spot with McCutchen and Hayes both out. So yeah, some interesting happenings like deeper league stuff with the Pirates, even as they kind of predictably fade away in the terrible National League Central.
What are we talking about with Ke'Bryan Hayes if he wasn't like the best third baseman in baseball defensively? Like, is he even a guy that is he is basically a faster Jack Sawinski, man, or excuse me, Hanrahan
Jack
is who
Sawinski's
I was.
good.
Yeah, I like Sawinski. He is just a defense guy to me right now. Like the hard hit percentage is encouraging, I guess. His expected batting average tells you that he should be better than he is, but his approach is so bad. He swings at so many pitches outside of the strike zone, makes contact with him, but it's just really hard for me to believe he's ever going to be the power guy that we thought we saw in 2020. Just a real big
yeah.
The long term
totally
still get a
give
shot.
up on him. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think I
the
can give up on him
defense
for
and the
2022
tools,
though.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's 26. Like we've seen guys like this that are kind of sustained by their defense. Sometimes it's catchers. But
Mhm.
then like, they get enough reps at the major league level against major league pitching that they kind of figure something out, figure out how to best use their skill set. And hopefully Hayes will reach there eventually. This is going to be kind of, I mean, I wouldn't want to say a lost year because he'll rack up enough games, but he's like not gonna go in drafts next season. And so maybe that's the year that he has kind of a post type breakout or something. But that's looking at it optimistically. Some other injury news: Esteury Ruiz, who has
Yes.
already set the A's rookie record for most stolen bases in a season. He was placed
Crazy.
on the injured list Friday after dislocating his shoulder earlier this week on a dive back into a base. There's not a timetable yet for his return. I'm sure they're running some tests to see if the dislocation messed up anything else in that shoulder, but I think it'll be a little while, longer than 10 days at least. 43 steals in 85 games is what Ruiz leaves behind, the MLB stolen bases leader, and about the only useful Oakland player in fantasy. I guess Brent Rooker's had some stretches, and JP Sears has been useful sometimes as a streamer. But looking out there on waivers for some cheap speed players
Yeah.
that can swipe bags and who play often enough to swipe bags and help keep Ruiz managers on top in that category during his absence. Willie Castro is at 19 steals with the Twins, almost got to 20 on Friday, but was caught. It would have been a 2-steal night for him. He's in the starting lineup for the Twins a lot, whether he should be or not. The Twins offense has been terrible this year, especially lately. Castro is eligible at like every position too, so some flexibility there, and he's widely available. He's rostered in like less than 5% of leagues. Jorge Mateo's like at the top of the chart there. Jaron Duran is at like 30% roster percentage. Duran's the best get if he's available for you. Playing really well and an easy plug-in for Ruiz as an outfielder. Joe Adell too. What he hit cleanup in his first game back in the majors on Thursday, hit fifth and started in center field on Friday, helping to cover for the loss of Mike Trout. Joe Adell ripped it up in AAA again, like he always seems to do. And maybe this is like finally the opportunity that
Yeah.
he takes advantage of. Not that he's going to be a huge speed demon, but if you just need an outfielder, I would roll the dice with Adell or grab Jaron Duran, who fits the profile a little bit better.
Yeah, it's been kind of comforting seeing Duran play as well as he has, just because he was somebody I was so high on coming into 2021, and his approach at the plate was so bad in 2021 and 2022. It just didn't look like he was ever going to reach those lofty heights. Still has his defensive bugaboos, not exactly an elite defender out there, which is goes to prove that, hey, just because you are a fast guy doesn't necessarily mean you're a good defensive player. I've noticed that for my Seattle Mariners with one Teoscar Hernandez. There's one other injury that we wanted to get into before we get into the second half of our show. Jordan Montgomery, a hamstring tweak. Kind of a scary little situation there for the Cardinals, whose pitching staff doesn't exactly inspire a lot of hope, even with Jordan Montgomery.
No. Yeah, another doom and gloom sort of turn of events for my Cardinals who are stuck in a doom and gloom cycle. Montgomery left his start Friday against the White Sox with a right hamstring injury. Just kind of pulled it. It looked like on a pitch to Elvis Andrews in I think it was the 5th inning. And he's probably going for imaging as we chat here right now on Saturday morning. The Cardinals could delay an IL decision until after the All-Star break, but this sounds like a multi-week thing from what we know at the moment. It sounds like it's a strain. Even if it's a mild strain, he'll probably go on the IL, which brings the trade deadline conversation into play, given that Montgomery's an impending free agent and the Cardinals are buried even in a bad NL Central. And he's been really good up to this point, and I think could fetch a decent haul if he can make it back to full health before the August 1st deadline. They've got Jordan Hicks, Jack Flaherty potentially on the block, and I kind of wish they would dangle Paul Goldschmidt. I know they're not going to, but with so many contenders needing rotation help, I could see Montgomery definitely moving because they didn't even talk to him about a contract extension this spring, according to reports.
Wow.
I don't know how the Cardinals are going to navigate this. Like Michael McGreevy has been talked about as a potential call-up candidate. Talked about like by speculators, not by the Cardinals themselves. They've just got so many innings to cover with Adam Wainwright out indefinitely and looking all of 41 years old. And just the rest of the rotation being really underwhelming. It might be a situation where McGreevy is just absolutely needed, unless the Cardinals want to just tank the rest of the way, which I wouldn't hate. I think they need to be aggressive and do something, one way or the other. And McGreevy's not like a big swing and miss guy, more of a command dude. He has a 3.26 ERA with 70 strikeouts in 91 innings this year between AA Springfield and AAA Memphis. 18th overall pick in the 2021 draft. A name to watch at least. I don't know if he's actually going to come up. Maybe they just put Dakota Hudson in the rotation, and that'll be wonderful.
Oh, buddy. Well, here's the good news. For once, you're actually going to earn one of your high draft picks instead of it being handed to you by a Major League Baseball. I think you're actually going to actually deserve the high selection that comes. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on.
I'm going on vacation tomorrow, so nothing can affect me, Chris.
Nothing can hurt you. There you go. Absolutely. Very jealous of that for sure. We're going to get into our futures game discussion in the second half, but first let's take a quick little commercial break. Drew, do you like home runs?
I do.
Do you like knowing when home runs are going to happen?
That'd be nice.
Well, we know the weather can impact how far a ball can fly, but we never know what all that heat and humidity or cold air is really doing to that ball. The Home Run Forecast Index gives us an easy way to determine how good or bad the air is for ball flight. The index is calculated by measuring stadium-specific weather conditions and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the most unfavorable for good ball flight and 10 indicating the most favorable air. There is a strong correlation between the index and the number of runs scored per game and the number of home runs hit. Games that have the highest index 10 for the whole game average over 10 runs and 2.8 homers over the course of the year. An index is created each game so you can see what it will be in any stadium and how the weather's influence might change over the course of the game, as well as the wind direction. Right now, you can get early access to the HRF Premium site for only $5 a month and see what the index will look like for every hour of every game. Go to homerunforecast.com now to sign up.
All right. We're going to get into this futures game. We kind of came up with a top 10, or you did, and I just poached off it. Because you're heading out there. You're a Seattle guy, and you're going to go check
Yes,
out
sir.
all this talent on the field there at, what is it, T-Mobile Park now? And
T-Mobile Park.
you
It's
revealed to
Safeco
me
to
before the
me,
show
but
that, yeah, always Safeco. You're in some kind of like fantasy suite with like prime rib and
yeah, yeah,
martinis. You said you're going to be drinking diet sodas earlier. I think it's going to be domestic light beers, um,
yeah.
and
Maybe both.
top
Maybe both.
top shelf liquor.
That sounds good.
But
By the way, real
yeah.
quick,
So
before
yeah,
I get
go ahead,
into
go
it,
ahead.
just wanted to tell everybody, if you happen to be in the Seattle area, I'll be at Jimmy's on First, which is right across the street from it, from about 1 to 2. So come say hi.
Yeah, so we're gonna throw out 10 names and maybe some honorable mentions of players that were invited to the futures game. Some of them participating, some of them have had to bow out, but just names to watch for long-term fantasy appeal. And we kind of ranked them in the top 10, but it's really just a reason to talk about some of the more exciting prospects that are going to be on the field later in the day on Saturday. And I thought this was interesting. A few names from the 2021 futures game for anyone who might be like skeptical that these guys, can quickly emerge and be impactful fantasy options at their respective positions. Again, this was just 2 years ago. We had at catcher in the futures game, Adley Rutschman, Francisco Alvarez, Bo Naylor, at first base, Spencer Torkelson, at second base, Bryson Stott, shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr., third base, Nolan Gorman, outfielders, Julio Rodriguez, Riley Green, Jared Kelnick, Michael Harris. It's a little bit lighter on the high impact pitchers. Some of those guys have not quite developed yet, but Nick Lodolo was there, Reed Detmers, Brian Bayo, and Shane Baz. So it happens quickly, even more so in modern baseball, where teams will get aggressive once young players show they're ready and the contract stuff is figured out. Get value out of your cost controlled dudes while you can, and more teams are kind of embracing that. All right, let's get into it here. These are your rankings. You want to give any disclaimers before we begin, or let's just jump right into it?
The only thing I'll say is I don't have a personal infatuation with the name Jackson. There just happens to be a lot of kids that are being named Jackson around this time, and you're gonna hear about 3 of them, but it is purely coincidental.
I did notice that. Yeah, number
Yeah,
1 on the board, Jackson
yeah,
Chourio, outfield
yeah.
prospect for the Brewers. A somewhat underwhelming 714 OPS this year at AA, 249 average, 304 on base, 410 slug. But I think you see the skill set in the counting
Yeah.
stats: 11 homers, 50 RBIs, 23 steals in 71 games this year with Biloxi. 36 homers, 47 steals in 215 total games since he began pro ball in 2021. And that was at age 17, 19 years old now, just turned 19 in March. All the tools. I know the Brewers like to talk about Chourio's intangibles too, and he can play all 3 outfield spots. Are you surprised that he's not hit as well at AA, or just kind of a thing that it comes with the territory of being a newly turned 19-year-old?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this guy turned 19 in March. Like, he is playing at an advanced level that, like, there are players that are going to several players, high school players that will be picked in the MLB draft starting Sunday that are at the age that Jackson Chourio is. I would have liked to see a little more consistency, and there's been a little more swing and miss than I would have liked to have seen. Although 69 strikeouts in 71 games isn't terrible in today's date and age. It's just not, elite by any stretch of the imagination. Every tool is here for Jackson Chourio to be a fantasy superstar. We're talking about the ability to hit the ball hard. There's plus power. There's plus speed. There's also the fact that he's an elite defensive player, potentially in the outfield as well. And that does matter, because while you won't get fantasy points for it, it does help him on his rise through the system. Like, he is that center fielder. He has a chance to be an elite defensive player. Only Drew Jones would I put well above him in terms of defense in the outfield. All of the tools are here from him to be successful. You're not talking about him as being a guy who makes an impact this year, and you maybe have to wait a little bit till 2024. But in terms of just pure fantasy skill set, I don't think there's any prospect that really comes all that close to Jackson Chourio.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what he's done counting stats wise. Well, like not having the best overall like rate stats and striking out a bit more than he had last year. Once he kind of figures it out, he just turned 19 years old again. But
Right.
you could talk about the entire package here. And the Brewers will have Garrett Mitchell coming back healthy sometime next year. Joey Weimer's been, a little bit up and down, but pretty impressive. They've got Sal Frelick too.
Hmm.
They're going to have too many outfielders at some point.
Yeah,
Christian Yelich is obviously locked up long term too, and actually having a pretty decent year in fantasy.
for sure.
So they'll be creative with some trades, I'm sure, maybe even at this year's deadline to start freeing up space for some of these guys. Number 2 on your list, another Jackson Holliday, shortstop prospect for the Orioles. He's played some second base too, and a tiny bit of third. You'll have better knowledge on how his defense projects than I do. The offensive numbers are bonkers.
Yeah.
Jackson Holliday still looks like a baby to me. I'm pretty sure I was actively rooting for Matt Holliday at Busch Stadium like 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure on that time frame.
Yeah.
But for young Jackson right now, a 324 average, 974 OPS through his first 416 professional plate appearances. This year he has, overall, 8 homers, 24 steals, 22 doubles, 6 triples in 91 career professional games. He raked in rookie ball. He raked in low A ball. He's now raking at high A ball. Just sure looks like a rising star at age 19. I wouldn't shock me, I guess, if he finishes this year at Double-A. The
Yeah.
number 1 overall pick in the 2022 MLB draft, not even a full year ago, because that draft started more toward mid-July, July 17th, I believe it was last year.
Right.
And he's done everything you'd want in like the first calendar year of being a professional. And I can't get over how young he looks, but man, there's not much more to say. Like, this dude looks like he's got everything.
Yeah, if we're talking about just pure prospects, not from a fantasy perspective, I think he's pretty easily the number 1 prospect in baseball. He's got a chance for a plus hit tool, plus power. That's still coming. Like, he's still tapping into that. But the fact that you see so many extra base hits, like he only has 7 homers this year, but he has
lasers,
17 doubles. Yeah, has had 6 triples. He has a really good approach at the plate. Everything is super advanced. As far as the defense, I think he's a shortstop for sure. It's one of the reasons why he was justifiably the number 1 pick in his draft. I could see him playing second base or third base just because the Orioles have so many dang infield prospects that, like, hey, if they determine like maybe this is the fastest way we can get him to the level. However, he's such an important part of their organization, I think, as a shortstop, that I think he's going to play there more often. Would I be shocked if he got a chance next year to play some second base or third base for them if they believe Gunnar Henderson or Joey Ortiz or Jordan Westberg, or goodness gracious, it's not fair how many infield prospects this team has, play shortstop instead? I still think he's absolutely a long-term shortstop. I don't know if he has the elite upside of, say, like if you're looking at like who counts as prospects right now, I don't think he has Ellie De La Cruz upside. I don't think he has Jackson Chourio upside. But he's in that Knox below. And if you're talking about just pure floor, I don't think any prospect has a higher floor right now than Jackson Holliday, which is weird to say for a player that doesn't turn 20 until December of next year.
No, I think that's a good way that I view him too. Like, he feels really safe, maybe because of the pedigree. But like, just looking at the stat line, like he hasn't had any. He's going to run into some adversity at some level, but it just hasn't happened yet. And like, he seems to take every level jump just in stride, and he keeps doing what he's doing. Like, yeah, he's mostly hitting like doubles and triples right now, but some of those, like, as he grows and builds, like, just look at his dad and his brother who, coaches at Oklahoma State. Those are big men, and he's gonna round into form, be a huge dude at some point. I don't. Maybe he like keeps the athleticism and is able to continue playing shortstop too. The Orioles have a lot to figure out in that regard, but it's one of those problems that usually sorts itself out.
For sure,
and they can get creative with trades too. Number 3, Jordan Lawlar, of the up and coming Diamondbacks, actually the current NL West leading Diamondbacks by a half game over the Dodgers.
crazy.
Lawlar went 6th overall in the 2021 MLB draft out of Dallas Jesuit, which has pumped out a ton of great pro athletes in recent years. 28 homers, 66 stolen bases, and 167 total minor league games for Jordan Lawlar. He got off to a slow start this year with kind of a quick and aggressive promotion to Double-A to begin the season, but seems to have found it at that level now at age 20. Since the beginning of June, he has a 306 average and a 947 OPS that spans his last about 130 plate appearances. So encouraging on paper adjustments, at least from Lawlar. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you would have told me at this point last year that I would have two prospects ahead of Jordan Lawlar, I'd be pretty surprised, because I have been kind of infatuated with this dude since I saw high school tape of him. The Bobby Witt comparisons, I think, are pretty apt, except I think he actually is a better defensive player than Bobby Witt, which is nice to see. Although Bobby Witt has made a huge jump defensively this year from last year, which has been absolutely wonderful to see. This guy could do everything. Like he like we talk about the Jackson Holliday. Holliday has a higher floor. I think I would say that Lawlar has a higher ceiling, because I believe in his power and speed combination a little bit more, especially in terms of fantasy. Very easy to see this guy being a 30-30 player. It's not hard to see him with today's new rules for stolen bases being a 30-40, 30-50 type of player. He can really run, and he has a great acumen on the diamond. Real quick, just because I thought of it, is anybody freaked out more for nothing than the Corbin Carroll shoulder injury that happened the other day? I think all of us were ready to put that guy on the.
Dude, even Carroll said, because it was the second time in the last 8 games that he had left early and like looked to be in some discomfort.
Oh,
and he even said after he felt it again that he thought his season was over, but it's apparently just nothing, because he was right back in the lineup on Friday night. I don't know.
I went on.
I picked him third overall in our redraft last week.
I went on that cesspool of a website just for a second to see, and there were some reactions that were not great. And then when I see he's in the lineup the very next night, I was like, oh, okay, well, but yeah, back to Jordan Lawlar. I think there's a slim shot we could see Lawlar this year, just because he's been so good, and we have seen the Diamondbacks be fairly aggressive in the second half of years of calling up guys. I'd probably want to see him in AAA before, and maybe you will see that aggressive approach to AAA like at the end of July. He'd be someone I would be considering rostering in like an NL only deep league, just because if he does get that chance to play, the power and the speed, but he's definitely somebody that you got to pay close attention to, because his fantasy upside is quite palpable.
Your number 4 and 5 here are intriguing to me. Junior Caminero of the Rays at 4, 20-year-old shortstop and third base prospect from the Dominican Republic. Excellent minor league numbers at every stop so far. This year, a 333 batting average at 996 OPS between High A Bowling Green and the Double-A Montgomery Biscuits. I always have to say that full team name. Double-A Montgomery Biscuits. Emerging power, quickly rising up rankings. He wasn't on that many top 100 lists heading into this year, but drawing a lot of love this summer. What's the story with Caminero? He, like, originally signed with the Guardians as an international free agent, and then the Rays, like in very Rays fashion, scooped him up in sort of like a 40-man. There's always that 40-man roster crunch, the sort of the non-tender deadline issue around November. This happened in 2021, and the Rays got him from the Guardians for what is it? A guy who's a pitcher who's in the Brewers system, right? Jacoby Myers, I think was his name.
I think that was the deal.
If that's right. Yeah, it was just like one of those 40-man moves, and the Rays got him, and now he looks like, I mean, he's one of the top prospects in baseball.
Tobias Myers, by the way. Jacoby Myers is the wide receiver that is usually your wide receiver 4 in fantasy. But yeah, that is a trade. Look, the Rays acquired Curtis Mead for Christopher Sanchez, who's actually looked okay lately and made that trade not look as horrific as it was lately. The Tobias Myers trade will never be a good one for the Guardians. This will be their Casey Blake, Carlos Santana reversal, basically. There are some folks, Drew, that I talked to who think Caminero is the best prospect in baseball. Like,
wow,
not just best rising prospect, not just best prospect in the Tampa Bay system, just flat out the best prospect in baseball. This is a 20-year-old who has elite power, elite feel for the barrel. The only reason why he ranks below the names that we have below is just stolen bases aren't going to happen. He is a fringe average runner. I could see double digits, and that's great, but he's also got a chance to win a batting title, which I hate the name batting title, but he does have a chance to lead the league in average. He has a chance to hit 30 to 40 home runs. He has a chance to be an elite run producer. Defensively, I think he's more of a third baseman than a second baseman, especially if we see the shift actually start to get limited. I think that's going to become more important because you're not going to be, even now, you can't play him as the rover in the middle of first and second base. Range is going to start mattering more. As I believe they're going to start pushing back these shift things every CBA or whatever the heck you want to call it. I love the bat. He has a chance to, in terms of just the offensive upside of hitting for average and hitting for power, I'll put him above anybody. The only reason why I put him in the middle of this list is just the fact that, look, in fantasy baseball, if you're playing in a 5x5 league, stolen bases matter. And 20% of the category, Caminero is going to be well behind those guys. But he has a chance to be a special offensive player. Oh, gosh, the Rays. They're so good at this. It's so annoying how good they are at this. It would be so great if they spent money. But you cannot deny that their player development system is as good as anybody.
Yeah. Caminero's numbers they're just loud.
Yeah.
Number 5, I said, was also an intriguing one. Marcelo Mayer, shortstop prospect. Marcelo Meyer, shortstop prospect for the Red Sox. He was the 4th overall selection in the 2021 draft out of a high school in California. Entered this season as a consensus top 15 overall prospect. I'm an idiot who just looks at stats usually when it comes to prospects, and I'm not seeing especially glowing numbers from Meyer this season between high A and double A. So I don't know, sell me and the Sox fans on this one. I know the general evaluation with him is kind of all over the map, but it seems like, the Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, the MLB pipeline people of the world seem pretty high on him. I don't know if that's a consensus, but people love him and some people are skeptical, it seems like.
Yeah, and there's reason for some skeptibility. I think that's a word. So he's played 64 games. In Greenville, he was hitting 290, 366, 524 over 145 plate appearances. That's good. Since his promotion to double A, he's at 196, 266, 402. That's not good. Here's the thing. I'm not going to destroy a player's value, so to speak, especially a 20-year-old for 112 at bats in double A. Like there's still way too much offensive upside. Like even with the struggle of what's been happening in double A so far, a 249, 322, 471 line isn't abhorrent. It's not an elite prospect by any stretch of the imagination. I like Meyer as a floor guy because he has a chance to, he's already starting to tap into the power. He hit all of 13 home runs last year while hitting 30 doubles. The homers are starting to come. He's already hit 13 homers. He's stolen 9 bases. There's a lot to like about Meyer's skill set. We might be went a little too high on him being a potential guy to help them this year. I was thinking there was a real shot because of the fact that they didn't get a shortstop in Trevor Story. He's going to come back, but I still think Meyer has a chance to be a better option for them than Story. I think Story is better at second base at this stage in his career. A guy who we're talking tools, has plus hit, plus power, solid average speed, and a really good defender at shortstop. The best defensive player in the infield that we've talked about so far by a long shot. Yeah, the numbers in double A are disappointing. I wouldn't hold him against him too much. I think Meyer has a chance to be a fantasy star in a couple of years.
I dig it. It's hard to evaluate these guys just based on numbers. It's what a lot of us do, of course, but it's why it's nice to have you on who really digs into what you're hearing around the sport. I appreciate you, Chris. Number 6 is James Wood, outfield prospect for the Nationals. This is a large human being at 6'6", 240 pounds. Part of the big Juan Soto haul from the Padres at last year's trade deadline. This year for Wood, an 881 OPS with 14 homers and 13 steals in 75 games between high A Fredericksburg and double A Harrisburg. He's fallen off a bit since the promotion to double A in late May, but that's to be expected with another 20-year-old on this list. And Just in terms of like eye test, he looks like he could be a force for a long time for Washington. And I don't know if the speed's going to remain part of his game, but you see that guy running down the second base line at you or something. I'm moving out of the way.
Yeah, he is a big man. Like if you took just a look at him, you would say, "Oh, that's a defensive end for Clemson or something like that." But he's an outfielder, and he's a good athlete. Like he puts up plus run times, and he's solidly built. This is not a guy we're talking about. He's closer to Drew's body than to my body, is what we're talking about, and that is a compliment.
No one wants either of those options, man.
We'll see. But just flat out can rake from the left side. He has at least plus power. He could be an 80 grade power guy. I've seen some people give some lower grades there. I think that they are incorrect. I think that this is a guy you're talking about who can give you 30, 40 home runs on the regular, hits for a good average, has a solid approach at the plate, a lot of swing and miss, which is true for any 6'5" and above player. There are going to be strikeouts. Like he is going to have to just absolutely mollywop the baseball in order for the average to count, because, you know, he's struck out 92 times this year. He struck out 75 times in 76 games last year. He is that rare guy, though, that I think can hit for average even with a lot of strikeouts, because the ball just jumps off his bat. He's very similar to me in skill set to Elly De La Cruz, except for he doesn't have the 10.93 speed going from home to third base.
Right.
That is the one thing he doesn't have, but he's not slow. He should be able to be an outfielder. That's also nice. You know, you're not talking about a guy who's going to fill the util spot on your roster. I really like him. I think that you have a good chance to see James Wood hitting in the middle of the Washington order by this time next year, actually. I really believe in the skill set, and he'd be somebody that I would be considering using a draft slot on at the very end of drafts next year.
I dig it. I know you hate comps, so I'm not going to ask you for one, but I was trying to think of a comp for James Wood. It seems like, I don't know, these like big sluggers have become less valuable, but he seems athletic enough to where he's not just going to be like
he'll steal bases too.
Right. A 3 true outcomes kind of guy. He has a chance to be a little bit better than that.
Absolutely.
Number 7, Pete Crow-Armstrong, outfield prospect with the Cubs. Part of the return from the Mets for Javier Baez in the summer of 2021. It can be easy to forget how good Baez was during that stretch running Queens, because that Mets team fell apart after, over the final 2 months of the year. And then Baez leaves, which I'm sure the Mets, looking back, were fine with that he left for the Tigers, got that 6-year, $140 million contract. But what a big win for the Cubs that trade was, getting Crow-Armstrong, who's proven to be maybe an excellent long-term pickup. He was the 19th overall pick in the 2020 draft. No minor league ball that year. That was the COVID draft. He hadn't played much pro ball, if any, when the Cubs got him in the summer of 2021. That was right at the August 2nd trade deadline. There was a bad shoulder injury early on in his career, but I don't know, checking all the boxes now, could turn out to be a heck of a long-term acquisition for Chicago in that deal with Javier Baez.
Yeah, absolutely. At the very worst, Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to be one of the best defensive replacements in baseball. Like 80 grade defense, one of the best trackers of the baseball you'll see. Also has excellent speed. He can go get it with the very best with them. And he is the rare guy. I am always skeptical of when I hear swing change stuff. It usually means, well, this guy just might not be very good. Nah, the swing change was for a legitimate reason, and he's really tapped into his power. Now, we're not talking about a 30 homer guy. I think we're talking about 20 to 25 homers. He's only hit 10 this year, but he can hit the ball into the gaps. He's added a bunch of lofts to his swing. He has a really solid approach at the plate. He's like more assertive than like a guy who draws a ton of walks. He's only drawn 23 this year. That's not bad. He puts it on pace for about 60 or 70. Top of the order type of player who can steal bases. Already stolen 23, stolen 57 already in his 168 games. I think he's got a chance to be a 5-category player. Wouldn't completely rule out him having a chance to make his debut with the Cubs this year. Usually, the Cubs like to go station to station with these guys. But I could see, especially if the Cubs are still in that cesspool of a division, I could see them saying, hey, Let's see if we can get Crow-Armstrong in there. And at the very least, he's going to be a big improvement over what we're getting defensively. And if he can hit, that's great too. If not, I expect him to be a regular hitting near the top of the order by about 2024.
Yeah, I was going to ask who on this list is most likely to reach the majors first. It's probably who you have at number 10. We'll get to that. But
I think it's actually
Crow-Armstrong
number 9, but
probably...
we'll go. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, number 8. Let's before we what a tease. We're getting better at this. Jackson Merrill at number 8, the shortstop prospect with the Padres. A lot of hype coming into the year after a really good showing between rookie ball and low A last season. He was the 27th overall pick in 2021 out of a high school in Maryland. The numbers haven't been as spectacular in high A this season, but he just turned 20 years old. And even through like some of these stat line struggles, if we can call it that, in high A ball, he's cut his strikeout rate from an already low percentage. Seems to me at least to make a lot of contact, some of that hard contact. Tell me more about Jackson Merrill.
So in terms of hit tool, I think he takes the cake of all of the prospects that we've talked about, which is saying something because Jackson Holliday has a pretty special one. This was a guy who hit 339 last year. It's worth pointing out that Merrill was hitting about 261 until about 10 games ago and has seen that average go up 20 points. I believe in his hit tool as much as any prospect that we'll talk about today or any prospect in baseball. He's also a strong defender up the middle, should be a shortstop in the long term. The power is more project than current. He's hit 10 home runs this year in Fort Wayne. That's not a bad number at all in 68 games, but I do think he has enough loft in his swing and is going to be filling out his frame enough. He's 6'3", 195 pounds. If you were a pitcher, you'd be screaming about the projection that this guy has in his body. I think he's going to fill out his frame and be a 20 to 25 homer guy. Not an elite runner, but I think 15 to 20 stolen bases, especially in today's age, is going to be reasonable for him. It was ridiculous that people were talking about this guy as a potential helper this year. He had not played above A ball, and people were saying maybe this guy could help.
The plate approach seems so mature. You know, I get why there was that.
Sure, absolutely. And there's so little swing and miss in this guy's game. He struck out 37 times in 279 plate appearances while still making hard contact. That's a very hard thing to do. He's more of a 2025 play for me than a 2024 play even. But I do think that in terms of a guy that you're looking for who can hit for a high average, probably hit at the top of the order for the Padres when he's ready to roll, somebody you have to be rostering in dynasty leagues right now.
All right, number 9, who we just kind of indicated could potentially help in the majors this year, Colt Keith, a third base prospect with the Tigers. He was a 5th-round pick in 2020 out of a high school in Mississippi. Looking like a great grab that was the former regime, I guess still Al Avila, before Scott Harris and company took over the Detroit front office. This year at age 21, but between AA Erie and AAA Toledo, Keith has batted .335 with a .993 OPS and 310 plate appearances, 16 homers, 19 doubles, and 57 RBIs in 67 games. Seems like the kind of guy that Tigers lineup could use. Man, just like looking at their lineup every day, and we do this as part of our job on RotoWire, fixing, projected batting orders. The Tigers are like throwing a lot of names at the wall and hoping they stick, and then that becomes their batting order on a nightly basis. If we were talking about like a contender or even someone close to contending, I think it'd be a more reasonable, logical conversation to be like, he needs to be up in the majors right now. With where the Tigers are and what they project to be next year, unless some of their pitching injury woes can get sorted out, like I feel like maybe this waits until 2024. By all logic and reason, this guy should be up, but we know how that goes.
Yeah, I will say this though. The Cardinals that's a very horrible slip there. I very much apologize. The Detroit Tigers are only 6 games back. They're still kind of in this thing. So are the White Sox. The Royals are also a baseball team. I really like Colt Keith. And here's the thing. He might be in that draft the best player that they took out of Arizona State. Spencer Torkelson, I still think he has a chance to be a pretty good one, but I think Colt Keith has a chance to be the best player they took out of there, in part because I do think Colt Keith has a chance to be a third baseman. He is not an elite defender. He's a below average athlete, but you're talking about plus hit tool and plus power. It's worth pointing out that he just got the promotion to AAA. It's only 29 at bats, 414, 471, 655. That'll play, folks. He's really impressed. Scouts have been really impressed with the work he's done on developing the power. That was kind of the biggest question mark, was whether or not that power was going to develop. Now most people have the power tool ahead of the hit tool. A chance to be 65-60 there, but it's certainly a player who I think major league ready in terms of offense. But because of the reasons you brought up, yeah, they're only 6 games back, but let's be realistic here, folks. The Tigers are closer to being sellers than they are to being contenders. Band geography, band divisions, all of that stuff. The fact that we're even talking about whether or not the Tigers could be a playoff team this year is absolutely stupid. But I really like Keith. If he is somebody that the Tigers do bring up, he's absolutely somebody I'd be adding for a fantasy roster, because the two positions he can play, third base and second base, are not exactly fantasy loaded. You know what I mean? So I'd be looking to add him to my lineup, and you can either put him in the corner infield spot, middle infield spot, third base, second base. A lot to like about Colt Keith.
And in like real life terms, they could DH him too. It's not like they've had an answer.
That's a good
DH
point.
Spot, you know?
Yeah, great point. Yeah,
they could play him anywhere. Like,
yeah.
Number 10, who I talked about, could potentially reach the majors this year. Kyle Harrison, starting pitcher for the Giants. There was talk in the spring about him making like an early season debut. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks at AAA Sacramento, and actually isn't going to pitch in the Futures game because he suffered a moderate right hamstring strain earlier this week. But that's just a blip. Giants president Farhan Zaidi said Friday that Harrison could still make his debut this year, which will become all the more likely if the Giants move some starting pitchers ahead of the August 1 trade deadline. I think they will actually finally do that. Harrison's only 20 years old, turns 22 in August, and has, a 4.79 ERA this year at AAA, a 1.56 whip, but he's young and he's struck out 92 batters in 56 and a third innings. He had 186 strikeouts in 113 innings last year between high A and double A. A fast rising dude as a third round selection out of high school in the shortened 2022 COVID draft.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about his long-term potential. Like, his swing and miss stuff is, and look, I knew that Harrison wasn't going to be participating in this. I just felt bad that I didn't
mention a
single pitcher in this thing, because let's face it, I'll mention a couple of names in the names to name type of thing. This is more of mid-rotation starter types or guys who are a few years away. There are a couple of exceptions. But look, you're talking about 70 fastball, 60 slider, and a 55 change when he shows it as well. It needs to show it more often. The issue with Kyle Harrison is he going to throw enough strikes? He's walked 44 guys in 56 in the third innings this year. It's been better as of late. And you see that he has struck out 92 batters in 56 in the third innings this year in AAA, which is just stupid. 214 average against. Can keep the ball on the ground for the most part. He's allowed 9 homers and 56 in the third innings this year. I don't think that's too terrible. I mean, that's in today's day and age. But I mean, it's not elite, but that does show you that the command needs work as well. It's not just the fact that he misses spots. He misses strike zone an awful lot too, along with it. Elite ace upside. The Giants have done a pretty darn good job with profiles like this as well, which is something that I think you have to add in. I could see Harrison being a multi-inning type of guy for them this year, like the type of guy who, look, I don't think anybody's using openers more than the San Francisco Giants this year. Like, it seems like every time we're updating the pitching schedule, we're guessing to see who's going to be opening for him. We can't have John Brebbia starting every game, folks. But it does.
Ryan Walker again today.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, there are just a ton of opportunities for him to be that guy who throws 2 1/3, 3 innings and still qualify for a win. I like Harrison a lot. Just be cognizant if he does get that call up. If you're in a whip battle, maybe steer clear, because there's a chance for him to issue an awful lot of self-inflicted damage.
Yeah, just throw out some other names that are going to be, or at least got an invite to the futures game and might make an appearance at some
Sh-
point.
Sure. Kyle Manzardo was the name that I had near the top of
Mm,
my list for a very long time. He is going through it, folks. Has really struggled as of late. Has made a big dip on my imminent arrivals article, which I'll promote real quick. Every Wednesday, I have my top 10 prospects for redraft leagues. But I still like Kyle Manzardo an awful lot in the long term. A guy who was showing close to an 80 grade hit tool before the season started. Has not really shown up, but he has a really good approach, above average power, limited to first base, but I still think offensively he has a chance to be a really good one. One of the few guys who got an invite for the Mariners, Jonathan Clase, already hit 15 homers and stolen 40 bases. His stock is on the rise, folks. Definitely a player I'd be considering adding in Dynasty now because it's going to take a lot if you want to add him at the later portions. We're talking about a 2025 play more than a 2024, maybe even 2026. There's some work to be done here, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Heston Kierstad, which I think is one of the best stories in baseball, a guy who we didn't know when he was going to get to play again, to be completely honest with you. After he was the second pick of the 2020 draft, dealt with some health stuff, has looked really good, chance to draw a ton of walks, has above average power. Not a great defensive player, but I think good enough to be an outfielder. Once again, the Orioles are just a stupid organization right now. Tink Hence, one of the pitchers that I wanted to talk about, one member of your Cardinals. Don't think we're seeing him this year, but certainly has the stuff to be a near the top of the rotation starter, probably the most upside of any pitcher that was invited to this list, except for one guy that I'll bring up in just a second. Ryan Bliss of the Arizona Diamondbacks has put up absolute monster numbers in Double-A. Was not a prospect that a lot of people were talking about before the year. Now I think Bliss does have a chance to make his debut this year. Be nice if he was doing it in Triple-A instead of Double-A. There are not a ton of prospects in AAA right now that are putting up big numbers. Most of the good guys are either already up or they are in the lower levels. Everybody we talked about on this list pretty much. I don't think Colt Keith and Charles Harrison were the only AAA guys that we talked about, and they were at the very bottom of this list. Yeah.
A lot of Double-A and high A guys. Sorry.
A lot of Double-A and high A guys for sure. And then real quick for the Milwaukee Brewers, a guy who's rising real quick, and I'm going to screw up pronouncing his name because I've done it every time. Jacob Misiorowski, Jacob, we'll just call him Jake. One of the best pitching prospects in the Milwaukee system already, has made a massive leap. A guy that a bunch of people think is actually a top 50 prospect now. Made a huge leap in terms of them. Exciting to see. But most of the pitching that you're going to see today, folks, is back end mid-rotation stuff. It's disappointing. It has to do with the fact that a lot of these guys have already played in futures games before a couple of times, and the fact that there's just a lot of injured pitchers. There are a lot of pitchers like Andrew Painter, who, oh boy, getting checked out right now. A couple of pitchers for the Guardians that have been called up, and then Daniel Espino, who I think has some of the best stuff in the minor leagues. Unfortunately, an injured guy too, who hasn't had a chance to make his debut. You could argue that the two of the best prospects in baseball haven't gotten a chance to pitch. I did see somebody real quick, Drew, ask about hanging on to Yuri Perez. Yeah, I'm still rostering Yuri Perez. This is extremely frustrating and extremely stupid. It's unbelievable that Major League Baseball lets this stuff happen. Oh, it makes me mad. But I'm still rostering Yuri Perez. Oh, I just got real angry real quick thinking about the Yuri Perez.
I agree with you. I think it depends on what kind of format your league is in.
Sure.
But he's going to be back. They're using All-Star break, and of course he's going to have a stunted workload eventually, but I think he's going to get another start before the end of July. Is that crazy to think? Like, or at least around the beginning of August? I don't know.
I sure hope so.
Either way, we need to get you to your all-inclusive dirty martini futures game suite at T-Mobile Park. So let's do 2 streamers for Sunday, and then we'll get you out of here. Give me yours.
I'm going to go with Brandon Bialek, in part because I looked at Sunday's list and it was not inspired. And I will just say that the main reason I'm going with Bialek is because the Mariners have scored a bunch of runs as of late, and I can see that slowing down. I could see Bialik being the guy who kind of puts a reality check into my Seattle Mariners a little bit. He's pitched pretty well. I mean, he hasn't been an elite option by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just throwing my dart out there with Brandon Bialik. I think you probably just threw a dart out with your name, to be honest, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are like some really like top tier names that are closing out the first half for their respective teams, but there's not a lot to choose from a streaming perspective. I went with JP Sears, who I mentioned earlier as an occasional streamer for the A's. He's going up against the Red Sox in Sunday's first half finale. 7 1/3 scoreless innings last time out at Detroit, a 1.05 whip on the season, 89 strikeouts and 94 2/3 innings. So maybe some ERA help and some strikeouts. That Red Sox lineup has been easy to navigate at times this year. I know their team-wide OPS is all right, but I wouldn't bank on a win for JP Sears with the A's being the A's, but good rate stat play, I think, on Sunday. And I'm finally going to win one of these because you've dominated me the last 2 weeks.
Yes, I have, but that's okay. It's been a fun first half, Drew. We've had fun doing this all year, and we look forward to giving you a bunch more stuff over the second half of the year.
That's going to do
Cod
it. And
oh yeah, Cape Cod.
10 hours.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Although getting on a plane sounds miserable to me right now. But that's okay. That'll do it for this episode of the RotoWire.
I'll survive that. I'll survive that.
You will survive that. That is for dang sure. That'll do it for us on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast for the third time. Follow us on Twitter. I am at Crawford_MILB. Drew is at Drew Silva. Pretty soon we'll be promoting our Blue Sky accounts, folks. Rate and review the show if you like what you're hearing. Hit that subscribe button as well, and check out more episodes from a variety of hosts on a variety of topics every single day of the week. Watch the Futures game. It's a fun one.